Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is September 6th, 2017 here. This is Storm Spotter for the National Weather Service. Timothy Bro from Phoenix, Arizona, coming to you with another video update on, well, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I don't usually make predictions for tropical storms at all. But, there's a lot of people worried about it because, after what, the storm did in Texas, what Harvey did was catastrophic. It was really bad. There's so many people still without homes right now. And, our prayers are with them, whether you believe in God or not, or if you believe in nothing, at least, say a prayer or do something to help give these people hope. They need all the hope they can get right now. So what you're looking at here is a very busy Atlantic hurricane season this year. We got 3 hurricanes that I'm going to talk about. Of course, the strongest one and the one with the most attention right now is Hurricane Irma, and where she's going to move next. She has, really done significant damage to almost catastrophic damage in some spots right now, especially across parts of northern Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and parts of Cuba could also get on the act of this. It's still a relatively strong Category 5. The pressure is low right now. I'm going to take a look at each hurricane, and I'll start with Hurricane Katia right now, and what she is doing. She's just a weak hurricane. She's a Category 1. She's moving east-southeast at 2 miles per hour. The pressure is 989 millibars, and the max sustained winds is at 80 miles per hour right now. And as far as her track goes, she's going to move into, she's a hurricane, and she'll likely make landfall as a hurricane. And this storm is going to start turning. It's moving east-southeast right now, but it's going to turn and start heading southwest around a ridge high pressure that's located over parts of Belize and Guatemala and El Salvador. It's going to kind of circulate around, kind of bring the storm downward a little bit. And by the time it reaches, this part of Mexico, it's going to be a depression. But what it's going to do is bring very heavy rains, widespread flooding rains. I don't know if it's going to bring catastrophic flooding, but usually when hurricanes move over the mountainous terrain, everything is squeezed out over the mountains. So we tend to get very heavy rainfall for at least 1 to 2 days. This area is going to have to be watched closely. Thursday, Friday, and potentially even into Saturday, Sunday. Very heavy rains located around this part of Mexico here. And even parts of Guatemala, Belize could get a little teeny bit of some precipitation from this, but most of it's going to be focused here within the cone area. All right, now moving on. Our prayers will be with them too as well. Again, this is a very active season here. And we just got a lot going on right now. So that is going to likely hit as a Category 1, potentially Category 2 storm. Now we're going to talk about Jose. Does Jose pose any threat to land? Or is it going to go past Bermuda? Again, these models are subject to change a little bit. But right now, the good news about Jose is that though it's likely to become very briefly, a major hurricane, winds probably 115 miles an hour or so, gusting to around 140. Then it moves just past the Virgin Islands, past Puerto Rico, and heads, up in this general direction. It looks like it's going to right now either head near Bermuda as a tropical storm, or it's going to go further north and then out to sea. But impacts on Bermuda right now are uncertain. It's a little bit far out to really speculate whether Bermuda is going to get a direct hit from this tropical storm. It should be a tropical storm by then. At least we hope it will be. The good news is that it's not taking the same path as Irma. Okay, so though it's close, it's not right now an immediate threat to land. But high seas for Bermuda, the Bahamas, Virgin Islands, even after Irma passes, there'll be some high seas, but also some big waves possible for Bermuda, with some possible gusty winds and some outer rain bands from Jose as it curves northward. But right now, a direct hit on Bermuda is not likely at this time. All right, now for the most important one, the strongest hurricane of them all. And I'm going to look at Irma here. Now, she has weakened slightly. That's some good news, okay? It hasn't weakened a lot. But right now, she is moving west-northwest at 16, so the speed has actually increased just a little bit over the past 24 hours. Her minimum pressure is still quite low, but it's not as low as it was 2 hours ago, where it was at 914 millibars. And her winds have also dropped about 5 miles per hour, so still very strong Category 5, 180 mile per hour winds. That's still very, very life-threatening. Okay, so what about, the storm itself? Where is it going to head? Okay, now here's a probability cone, and there's some good and bad news here. Okay, there's some good and bad news here. Now, as far as Florida taking a direct slam from this thing, she is forecasted to weaken to probably Category 4, Category 3 status by the time it reaches just north of Miami. She might slightly move inland to just a little bit, but I believe that most of Florida will be spared the worst of the storm. But again, her wind field is very large, okay? So you can see how the cone expands and gets wider as it heads north. Right now it's pretty narrow, but it's going to become a large storm. But the thing is, even though it may not make a direct impact or move onshore into Florida, or even if it remains east off of the coast a little bit, it's kind of following the path Matthew did a little bit. But, we could still see winds in excess of 65 to 75 miles an hour sustained in parts of Florida, which would make a strong tropical storm to weak hurricane force winds, with a couple of gusts approaching 100 to 110 miles per hour along the immediate coast here, the East Coast. And again, some heavy rains for Florida for sure. The only saving grace from the storm, too, as far as flooding goes, is that it's going to be moving relatively quickly, but not super fast either. But you're going to have a good 6 to 12 hours of heavy rainfall, if not longer than that. And those rain bands could be quite intense. Now, as this storm continues to move over Puerto Rico, just north of, Dominican Republic and stuff, here. Now, it's impressive. The storm I've seen some satellite imagery, radar, and I've also seen some video out of these areas. We're getting lightning with the hurricane. Now, lightning with hurricane is not an unheard of event, but it's kind of rare to see the amount of lightning that this storm has had. That's because it is very intense right now. And, but again, last week they had this storm moving into parts of Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, but now people in Georgia, coastal Georgia, they had this as a major hurricane up here. Just last model run. Good news is now it says hurricane. So we're looking at Category 1 to Category 2 status by the time it reaches the Carolinas. Now, parts of the Carolinas, South Carolina, you're specifically going to get some tropical storm force winds to potentially weak hurricane status wind. And some heavy rainfall, but it should not be a major hurricane by the time it reaches the South Carolina coast, which is, right now they're saying it could make landfall just south of Charleston, South Carolina at this time. But I don't think Charleston, you're going to get a direct hit. I've had some people down in the South Carolina, I've watched some people like preparing for the storm, saying it's going to be a end of the world type of storm. There's been volcanoes going off right now, earthquakes, huge forest fires in the Pacific Northwest right now. The skies in Arizona, New Mexico, California are hazy with smoke because all the smoke is rotating around the high pressure ridge. And we've had hailstorms in California, lightning storms, flash flooding. So that's because the monsoon plume has been, directed further west than it should be this time of year, because the high has been so strong. And it's been dry for weeks here in Arizona because the high just seems to be sitting overhead. But anyways, it's not the end of the world, guys. People are going to start taking advantage of people online saying this is it. September 23rd now, I hear, is the new Doomsday event with some lining of planets that hasn't taken place since Jesus' birth or something. I've read all kinds of stuff, but I mean, I'm not over religious or anything, but I have my own beliefs and they're to myself, and I like to keep it that way. But anyways, back to the hurricane, the Carolinas do need to be aware of this, but I don't believe it's going to have a massive, deadly impact on Georgia or South Carolina. I don't even believe it's going to have a deadly impact on Florida at this time. But again, where the storm is right now, she is still very powerful and is going to cause problems as she moves over the islands in parts of North Cuba, northeastern Cuba, and stuff. So she's still strong right now. We have to keep that in mind. Though as this, this is some encouraging news as it heads towards the U.S. It's looking weaker now. It looks like it might stay offshore somewhat, or maybe just come a few miles inland to Florida as a Cat 4. So we're still going to have high winds. We're still going to have problems. But the good news is that each track that I see is getting further and further offshore. But that can also have its own problems. That can sometimes help the storm maintain its strength. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that too. But let's take a look at her on satellite and just see what she looks like now. Again, there is some signs of weakening here. It's not drastically weakened, but, this is, better. It's looking better in terms of the size of the storm. But again, she could still very well get bigger. And, she is already showing signs of, she's a large storm for sure. And again, she's moving off to the west-northwest at about 60 miles per hour, pressure 921 millibars, just past Puerto Rico right now. They got some heavy rain and high winds, but she's heading into the Bahamas next, and she's still a very powerful storm and a deadly storm at that. This storm is nothing to mess with. If you are told to evacuate in Florida, please do so. Even though the storm may stay offshore and just be a near miss for Florida, you're still going to get, again, her wind field is large, so you're still going to get very strong hurricane force winds up to 100 miles an hour or greater, and some very heavy rainfall. And then as this moves inland and moves into the United States, she's also going to have the possibility of spinning off tornadoes, much like Harvey did. There were several reports of tornadoes with Harvey. And, this storm might eventually actually move into the Ohio Valley sometime middle of next week or the end of next week, and could cause some severe weather as well as some potentially flooding rainfall. Okay, so let's take a look at the path. Let's see what it does here. This is the forecast path according to the latest models. Still approaching the Bahamas as a strong category, well, a weaker end category 5. But again, she is a very powerful storm. Again, everyone, my prayers are with you, and forever else who believes in God, say prayers for these people. They need it right now. My prayers are with Florida and the Carolinas as well. If you don't believe in God, that's okay. Whatever you do, just if you talk to people on social media or whatever, bring them hope. Say kind words, and that you're thinking of them, and that your hopes are with them, and that everything is going to turn out okay, even though this is an unprecedented storm. Now, some people have said this is the strongest Atlantic hurricane we have ever seen. It's actually not. There was one storm, maybe its pressure is, but there was another storm. I don't remember which one it was, but there was a more powerful storm. Had winds of 190 miles per hour, and was also a Cat 5 for a decent amount of time, but it only maintained its Category 5 status for about 18 to 20 hours. This one has been going for almost 40 hours now. I think we're at 36 hours that this storm has maintained winds of at least 185 miles an hour, and with higher gusts. So again, that's Hurricane Irma. That's the latest projection, the latest forecast models. But again, if you're in the path of the storm, even if it's indirect, if you're told to evacuate, please do so now. Don't stay behind. It is not worth your life at all. Okay? Very dangerous situation. All right, so this video is going to be, a good 20 to 30 minutes long. We're now going to talk about the weather here in the North American Southwest deserts, which is where I reside here around Phoenix, Arizona area. And we're going to get a little bit of input of what we're going to see coming up. Now, the severe weather event I talked about last week was not widespread, because I wasn't expecting it to be widespread anyway. So the good news is there was no widespread severe weather. There was some, but it was not widespread by any means. But some of the storms that developed did indeed produce some moderate-sized hail, about up to the size of quarters, out of some of the strongest storms. And we did have some isolated areas of wind gust and wind damage. Rainfall was not that great because the storms were moving very rapidly. Okay, so some people have said, well, Tim, are we going to see a transition event in Arizona? or New Mexico, California, are we in that time of year that we're going to start seeing transitional events? Well, the answer to that is yes. This is going to be the second cutoff level